Hey everybody, it's another video on the SpicyTech channel from Cirrus. How are you doing? Hopefully y'all are all having a wonderful time so far. Wanted to let you know that I had another deck built for the $15 League Challenge, and I wanted to go ahead and introduce you to the commander today. This one is a very interesting build. It involves gaining a lot of life, dropping a lot of lands on the board, and of course, swinging out with a giant field of creatures. It is none other than Shannah, the Purifying Blade. So Shanna is a Bant commander. It just costs 3 mana to drop her down. At the beginning of your end step, you may pay X, and if you do, draw X cards, and X cannot be greater than the amount of life you gained this turn. So with this commander, we are going to be gaining, like I said, a ton of life, swinging out with a lot of creatures, and drawing a lot of cards. So how are we going to fuel this? Well, if you look at the 99, the secondary commander for this deck is actually Tatiova Benthic Druid. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, gain 1 life and draw a card. So this is actually the only form of draw we have in the deck outside of the commander, because I'm going to be honest, the commander is so low to the ground, you should be able to get this out and keep it protected, basically by making sure that your board is filled with all kinds of other threats. And we've got some recursion later in the deck, so even if you do lose your commander, you might not even be paying commander tax to play her because she actually costs 3. But let's get into the rest of that deck. How are we going to be gaining enough life to make sure that our commander is doing her job? Well, for that, we have an area of 6 creatures that can gain us life from the creatures that we are playing. First, we have Lunarch Veteran. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, gain a life. Gallic Readers, which can let you gain a life when another creature enters the battlefield under your control. Also, it can gain 1/1 counters. That's not really super important. It can also create treasure tokens, so the Gallic Reader can actually help you ramp if you need it to. Then we have the Impassioned Orator for 2 mana. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control, gain a life. Prosperous Innkeeper makes a treasure when it comes out and has the same clause. Gain a life when another creature comes in. Core Celebrant has the same clause. When another creature enters the battlefield under your control, gain a life. Or itself. It counts itself too. And then, of course, Social Climber also says when another creature enters the battlefield under your control, gain a life. There are some other creatures I would have loved to include in here, but we are working with a $15 building restriction, with the commander being $1 or less. So we do have to make some cuts, but we did not have to make too many cuts when it came to life gain from lands, however, because that is our next section here. We have Jadi Offshoot. Whenever a land ETBs, gain a life. Kazandu Nectar Pot. Whenever a land ETBs, gain a life. That's an insect. This one is the Grazing Gladeheart. When a land ETBs, gain 2 life. Retreat to Kazdu. When a land ETBs, gain 2 life. And Primeval Bounty does a lot of work for us. If you cast a creature spell, make a beast token. If you cast a non-creature spell, put 3 counters on a creature you control, and when you drop a land on the board, gain 3 life. Now, the non-creature part is important because if you remember, our commander actually has lifelink, so we can actually use that to guarantee our commander a lot of power, so we can swing into somebody, gain us a ton of life, probably kill something in the process because nobody wants a 6/6 commander coming at them, and then drawing a bunch of cards. Ideally, we should only be casting 1 card a turn and then using the rest of the mana to gain life, unless we are going for a relatively big turn. But I just showed you a bunch of ways we're going to do Landfall to gain life. How are we going to get all those lands onto the battlefield? That leads us to our ramp section. We have first Font of Fertility, 1 green mana, pay 2 to sacrifice it, get a basic land onto the battlefield tapped. Wayfarer's Bauble, it's the exact same card, but in colorless flavor. Dawntrudder Elk, it's the exact same card, but in flipped mana cost flavor. And then we have Edge of Autumn, which is a rampant growth that can also allow us to sack a land to draw a card if we need it to. Frontier Guide, which is repeatable land fetch. Search your library for a basic land card for 4 mana, put it onto the battlefield tapped. Colony Heart Expedition has Landfall. Anytime you play a land, put a quest counter on it. After you remove 3 quest counters from it, search your deck for 2 basic lands, put them on the battlefield tapped, and then you can go off to the races. Rampant Growth, of course, everybody's basic bitch land grab card. Search your library for a basic land. Put it in the battlefield tapped. Farhaven Elf. It's rampant growth on a stick. Pristine Talisman. This is actually our one and only mana rock in the deck because its only job is to give us a colorless mana and gain us a life. If we're in a position where we don't have any moves we can make, we can actually use the Pristine Talisman to just force our commander to have life gain to allow us to move forward with drawing cards. Say we're out and spent, we just got board wiped. This is a way to recover from that with our commander. Also, it's just generic ramp that's okay for life gain decks. Roiling Regrowth, sack a land, grab 2 basics, put them on the battlefield tapped, search for tomorrow, search for a basic, put it on the battlefield untapped, and it has a suspend 2, so we can play it on turn 1 if we have it in our opening hand. Springbloom Druid, it's the same thing as Roiling Regrowth, sack a land, grab 2 lands, put them on the battlefield tapped, and then Wood Elves. This allows us to search for a forest specifically, which will matter when we look at the types of lands we are going to be playing in the deck. But we need to make sure that our stuff is protected, and to do so, we need to be able to get rid of threats and protect ourselves from threats. So our removal and interaction package is going to begin with Negate. It can just counter a non-creature spell. Quasley Pridemage, this allows us to sack it to destroy any artifact or enchantment. It also has Exalted, so if we swing our commander in alone with this, it'll gain an extra +1/+1, which can be helpful in niche situations. Return to Nature gives us some graveyard interaction, as well as blowing up artifacts and enchantments. Scavenging Ooze is more graveyard interaction, and it can give us life when it's getting rid of graveyard stuff to trigger our commander. Wilt can destroy artifacts or enchantments, and it can also let us cycle for new cards if we need them. This is incredibly important since we are playing a deck with a relatively low amount of draw ability outside of the command zone, so this gives us access to a Naturalize that has a desperate plea we can use if need be. Angelic Purge is a sorcery that can exile any artifact, creature, or enchantment. This can be able to kill anything except a land or a planeswalker, and you have to sack a permanent to play it. We can sack a land if we really need to, since we'll be dropping so many on the board, or we can get rid of tokens, which you'll see how we're going to make a ton of tokens later. Then we have the Bant Charm. We can destroy an artifact with this, or throw a creature to the bottom of its owner's library, basically an exile spell, or we can counter an instant spell. This card is perfect. It literally has no bad effects. Then there's Reclamation Sage, blow up an artifact or enchantment when it ETBs. Meteor Golem, blow up any non-land permanent when it ETBs. And then Soul of Emancipation, which we get for Bant colors. We can blow up any number of non-land permanents and then make non-land permanents. It doesn't matter. It can even be creatures. For each of the permanents we blow up, we can make a 3/3 white angel creature token with flying. Now, there are some niche situations in which we have 1/1 tokens, and we're going to use this as a pseudo token spawner, but that's a win more thing. We're not going to do that too much, but it is an option that we have access to, just so we know. But speaking of tokens, we have a few ways to make tokens. Let's go ahead and talk about those. First, we have tokens we can make from Landfall, since we are primarily a Landfall deck. Rampaging Baloths makes a 4/4 beast when a land pops on the battlefield. Spore Mound makes a 1/1 Sapperling when a land hits the battlefield. Maja, Redguard Protector, makes a 1/1 human, but also it gives all of our creatures +1/+1. This can double the effectiveness of many of our tokens. Retreat to Emeria. This allows us to make a core ally token when we drop a land on the board. Emeria Angel. This allows us to make a 1/1 bird when it enters, or when we drop a land on the battlefield. Zendikar's Royal lets us make a 2/2 green elemental when it enters the battlefield. No, sorry, when a land enters the battlefield. And then Felidar Retreat lets us make a 2/2 white cat whenever a land enters the battlefield. But that's not the only way we have to make tokens. We have even more ways. Angelic Accord, for all the life we're going to be trying to gain in this deck, we can make a 4/4 Angel at the beginning of the end step if we've gained at least 4 life. Valkyrie Harbinger, same thing. If we've gained at least 4 life, make a 4/4 Angel that has flying and vigilance. So it's a bit stronger than the Angelic Accord Angel. I'd hope so for the 6 mana we're sinking into this. And then Griffin Airy. If we've gained at least 3 or more life, make a 2/2 white Griffin token with flying. This is probably the strongest of all of our life gain token generation, because we can drop this down so early in the game and let it just get way, way, way out of control as the game goes on. Now, here's the next thing. How are we going to actually keep our stuff around. We know that it's going to get killed. We know that if we're dropping a ton of permanents on the board that are spawning tons and tons of tokens, our opponents are going to blow up those cards before they hit our tokens, right? They know the tokens will kill them, but if they get rid of the token spawners, they survive. So, how are we going to recur our cards? Well, we have Emerius Shepherd. This is one of our 5 ways to recur cards. It allows us to get any permanent from our graveyard that is not a land into our hand if we play a land, but if we play a plains, we can return that permanent to the battlefield instead, and this is actually very important because we have ways to fetch plains from the deck and put them directly onto the battlefield. There's ways to abuse that, and I'll show you here in a second. We have Sun Titan. Whenever it enters the battlefield or attacks, take a permanent with mana value 3 or less from the graveyard, put it on your battlefield, and then we have Sun Titan at home, Redemption Choir, who also has lifelink for our deck, which is nice, but if it enters the battlefield or attack, we have 3 or more creatures with different powers. Return a permanent card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard. This card will be live very, very, very often. If you think about it, most of our tokens come out as 1/1s or 2/2s. So the Redemption Choir being a 3/3 means it will almost always have the Coven power requirement to be active and a threat. Now, we also have Evolution Charm, search our library for a basic land, or it can return a creature from our graveyard to our hand, or we can give a creature flying. We can use that to give our commander flying to activate its lifelink if we really need to. And then, of course, we have Perennial Behemoth. No budget Landfall deck is complete without a Conduit of Worlds or a Crucible of Worlds at home, and Perennial Behemoth definitely takes the cake on that one, being a 2/7 really hard to kill guy who just lets you play lands from the graveyard, which again will be important because I will show you. Perennial Behemoth, Redemption Choir, and Sun Titan can all be heavily abused with our lands. We'll get to that after we are done with one more section, and that is our board protection. We need to make sure that our board is protected when we are swinging it out at people, and we have 2 ways of doing that. We have an instant cast way with Unbreakable Formation. Creatures we have gain indestructible. This can protect us from board wipes, and if we use it on our main phase, it is a Lorded card. It will give all of our creatures 1/1 and Vigilance, which is just perfect. This means they can block right after swinging out. And then we have Frontline Medic, one of my new favorite cards when building go wide strategies. If it and at least 2 other creatures you control attack, all of your creatures gain indestructible, and just because Wizards of the Coast was on cocaine when they made this card, if any spell is cast that has an X in its mana value, you can just counter that spell unless the controller pays 3. Now, the mind game that this does to people is if they have, say, a Genesis Wave they want to cast, and they've got 4 or 5 mana to sink into the thing, this makes them go, hey, if you sink all that mana into it, the spell won't resolve. Or you can sink, 2 mana into the Genesis Waves X and get basically nothing. This is a pseudo stacks piece masquerading as a counterspell that you can sacrifice. It's a very, very strange card, but I adore it. Now, let's talk about our lands. We have 3 lands in our deck that have typings, and I like building lands with at least 3 lands that have typings if they are tricolored decks. We have Tangled Islet. It's a forest island. That matters for cards like Wood Elves, especially because if we play Wood Elves from the graveyard over and over again with things like Sun Titan, we can keep getting these typed lands from the deck. Prairie Stream is a typed plains island. It also enters untapped. If you have 2 or more basics, we have a lot of basics in the deck, so this will actually work really well for us. And then, of course, Canopy Vista, which is just another Tango land, and it's also typed, so it's fetchable. We can grab it with Wood Elves. But how are we fetching most of our lands out of the deck? Our deck is mostly basic lands, but we have a ton of ways to actually fetch lands from the deck. Starting with, of course, Bant Panorama. We are a Bant deck. I like the Panoramas a lot because they come into play untapped. I really, if I don't get a huge benefit from them, I don't like comes into play tapped lands. I really dislike them. So I'm a huge fan of the Panoramas. They let us fetch for the lands that our deck wants. This can get any of the lands our deck has in terms of basics. Blighted Woodland can get 2 lands our deck has that are basic. Broker's Hideout can grab any of the basic lands from our deck, and it gives us a life. Yes, it comes into play tapped, but I don't mind that because it does trigger our commander automatically on turns where we can't really get the life link or get any other triggers out. It gives us free draw. It's fine. Esper Panorama, another Panorama, but it doesn't grab us a forest. Myriad Landscape lets us get 2 basic land cards that share a land type, drop them on the board. Comes into play tapped, but it's a ramping land, so it's fine. Naya Panorama. This grabs us any land that's not an island from our deck, so that's still fine. Promising Vein lets us get any basic land from the deck into the play tapped. Shire Terrace, same thing as Promising Vein. Terminal Moraine, this allows us to get any basic land on the battlefield tapped as well. Warped Landscape is exactly the same as Terminal Moraine. And then, of course, we have a Terramorphic Expanse as well as an easy access way to get lands from the deck. They come onto the battlefield tapped, but that's fine. We can do things like cast Sun Titan, get back Terramorphic Expanse, and automatically use it to fetch a land out of the deck. The deck thinning isn't super important, but what is important is we can use it to say if we've got Emeria Shepherd on the board, right? Let me go ahead and flip to her. If you've got Emeria Shepherd on the board and you need a plains to revive a very powerful card like Teti Over from your graveyard, Sun Titan can't grab that. But if you play Sun Titan, you could get back Terramorphic Expanse, crack that card, grab a plains, and now suddenly you have your ability to get anything from your grave back onto the battlefield. No cost! You just got it for free. And then finally, we've got Exotic Orchard and Command Tower as Omni lands, 7 plains, 7 islands, and 7 forests. That is the deck in its entirety. If you want to take a look at this deck over on Moxfield, there will be a link in the description below, but it is a very budget-friendly deck at $14.82 for the entire thing. TCG player prices. I really think that Magic the Gathering should not be a game that is barred by price. I think anybody should be allowed to play and enjoy this game, and there should be entry points for this game for anybody who wants to play. So that is the entire purpose of the $15 deck challenge. It is a very restrictive budget building challenge that anybody can do, and if you want to pick up this deck, all you have to do is just hit the buy deck option on Moxfield. Like I said, I have the actual oh, sorry, there's one other thing. There's a few other things that are here. Completely forgot. There's one utility land in the deck, Sapseat Forest. It's only in here because it's a forest. You can fetch it out with Wood Elves, and you gain a life if you tap it and tap a green, and that can help us trigger our commander. Then we have 3 WinCon, just surprise I win cards. Completely forgot about these. Apologize, guys. But we have 4 the Emperor. Creatures you control get +2/+2 Vigilance and Lifelink until end of turn. Of course, we are a Lifegain deck, so that's very important. This can also just win the game for us if we have a big enough board. Storm the Citadel, another +2/+2 to all the creatures you control card. But this one does something really cool. Whenever a creature deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker while under the effects of Storm the Citadel, you can blow up any enchantment or artifact that player controls. So if we've got a board of like 12 creatures, we can throw them at our enemies willy-nilly, and if they're not blocking and sacrificing creatures to our large board, they are losing their Bolas's Citadel, they are losing their Prismatic Bridge, they are losing their Mana Rocks if we're really mean. Like, they are losing all kinds of stuff to us. And then, of course, we have a very budget-friendly WinCon as well in Trump the Domains. Until end of turn, creatures you control gain trample and 1/1 for each basic land type you control. So basically, they get trample and 3/3. This is just a 3-cent way to have overrun. That's what this is. I needed to make a small cut on money to get this to the $15 mark, and I didn't realize that Trump the Domains actually was an option that we had access to. I forgot that card existed, but now I know. So, as I was saying, I do think Magic should be a hobby that people can get into at any price point, and I think $15, just, you know, the price that people have fought for to be minimum wage for a long time, I think that's a very reasonable price point to get into Magic the Gathering on. So this challenge is going to remain a $15 challenge. Your commander can be $1 or less. Your 99 has to be at up to $15. It cannot be any greater than $15. Now, granted, if you build a deck under this challenge, it is snapshotted as far as I'm concerned. If the prices change on the cards in a week or so, it was a $15 deck when you built it, so it's a $15 deck as far as I'm concerned, right? A few pennies here or there don't matter. So if you want to bring a deck to the $15 challenge nights that I'm going to be running on my channel, then I'm not gonna smack you because your deck is $16 and a penny and your commander costed $1. Oh no, you went $1 over the 15, or you went a penny over the 15 limit. Oh dear, you're destroying the spirit of the format. Not going to do that. But I've got a ton of decks in this format that I want to show you guys, so hopefully y'all will want to see them. But I figured Landfall and Lifegain and just a ton of tokens and lots of draw from that, those are really, really nice things for players who are newer or who are not used to having access to really, really hugely impactful strategies, honestly. And if there's one thing that I like about building these kind of decks, even though handing somebody a precon is super easy in Magic, one, precons are more expensive than what I'm building these decks for. Two, and more importantly, precons are built with a very different design philosophy in mind. They want to be a stepping stone for you to build a deck out of. So usually they have a primary commander, a secondary commander, both commanders do something kind of different, and the cards in the deck are split between two different strategies. This deck is just one very linear, anything that lets you gain life and summon tokens, that's what we're focusing on. We're going to make sure that we get to the end goal with something like that. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. If you have any cuts or additions you would make to the deck that would keep it still under its price range. Maybe you've built a deck for $15 after hearing about doing this type of challenge. Maybe you have something you want to share otherwise, not Magic related, or it can be anything. Just let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you haven't already, and as always, everybody, insert end of video tagline here. Hey, I just quickly want to give a thank you to all of my wonderful patrons who keep this show running. YouTube and Twitch are a pretty bumpy ride at the best of times, and the stability that Patreon provides me is worth more than I can say here. I'd also like to thank each and every one of my $20 and up patrons here, and they would be Red Joker, Blitzkrieg, Cameron, Dren, Jemshin, Smiling DM, Poundini, Mabbity Babbity, Naomi, Isaac, Agamotto, Jordan, Ravi, Giuni, Kiratorian, Prisma, all of you, I'm not saying that part, and Starlight. And finally, thank you to everyone else that helps keep this channel alive. While you're here, why not check out another video? And thank you for watching.